Hello, I'm Deanna de Cabarrus from Songwriting Lessons Online. In this video, we are going to learn 5 easy to apply techniques that the Beatles used to write chord progressions. Quick heads up, I will be using the Roman numeral system to explain chord progressions like the 2 chord or the 5 chord. If you're not familiar with how that works, it's based on something called the harmonized major scale, and I've got another separate video that explains that. So you can go and check that out if you want to know what that is. You can still get something out of this video, but if you really want to understand it, that would probably be a good idea. Then come right back here. So the first tip is using the major 2 chord. So you're going to see the chords in the major scale as they normally occur in the key. And you're going to see that the 2 chord is usually minor. But one thing that the Beatles did was to make that chord major. So you can use a major 2 chord instead of the minor 2 chord. So rather than going from a C to a D minor, you would go from a C to a D. So the Beatles often flipped that minor 2 to a major chord. And that just gives us a slightly unexpected lift or brightness. So an examples of the Beatles using this in Yesterday is when it goes from F not to a G minor as we would expect in the key, so it's in the key of F, so the 1 chord would be F, the 2 chord would be G minor, but it goes to a G instead. I believe in yesterday. We have the same thing in 8 Days a Week. The song's in the key of D, and the chords go from D to E7 instead of D to E minor. In Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, we get a G to an A instead of a G to an A minor, which is what we would expect in the key of G. Sounds cool. In CeeLo Green's Forget You, we've got the same kind of thing. We've got a C to a D major instead of a C to a D minor. I see you running around town with a girl I love and I'll get you. Major 2 chord instead of the minor 2 chord. It's simple, it sounds great. Just try switching your minor 2 chord to a major and see how it changes how things sound and feel. So tip number 2 is to use the relative minor. The relative minor is the 6th chord in the key. If we have a chord progression like in the verse part of Yesterday that revolves more around the major chords, even if we hear some minor chords, the mood is predominantly sort of coming back to the major. But if I choose to orient a section and really emphasize the minor, that's going to change the mood. In the B section, we've got this. And it happens at a point of the lyric where the melody is going up, why she had to go, and it makes the whole thing more plaintive. So it's we land there, and that's what we are paying, that's emphasized by the accent and the lyric phrase. Now it feels different. It feels contrasted to the first section and it's changed the mood. Sounds great. Try it out. Orienting one section of chords more around the major chords in the key and one more around the minor. You can get that emphasis by placing the minor chord on the important phrases where the melody is, or at the beginning or the end, or simply using that chord more than the others. And that change of accent creates an emotional shift. The musical contrast is really enjoyable for the listener. Tip number 3. Make the 4 chord minor. So the 4 chord is a major chord in the key. In the key of C, the 4 chord would be F. But if you make it minor, that gives it a certain type of quality. It sort of sounds quite bittersweet. And we hear this in quite a few different Beatles songs. It comes up in My Life, There Are Places I Remember. Though some have changed. So that da-da-da just gives us nostalgic melancholy. And it's subtle, but it's lovely. We hear something similar in When I'm 64. So we've got, in When I'm 64, we've got the C. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da. F. Da-da-da-da. F minor. Even though it's a more light-hearted song, it's still a nice little emotional shading. A non-Beatles example would be Bohemian Rhapsody, On the Line As If Nothing Really Matters. Carry on as if nothing really matters. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Here it comes, as if nothing really matters. So sad and moody. So try that out. 4 chord as a minor instead of a major. You can either go from major to minor, like we had in When I'm 64, or you can just put it straight in as it was in Bohemian Rhapsody. This can sound especially cool in a bridge or on a final line. Tip number 4, change the harmonic rhythm. So that is the rate at which your chords change. So even if the chords themselves are simple, changing how frequently they move changes the feel. So it's going to feel differently if the chord lasts for 2 bars per chord versus the chord lasting for 1 beat per chord. So changing the rate of chord movement can create lift, drama, or a sense of stillness. So again, yesterday, in the bridge section, we get these, instead of the chords sometimes lasting for a couple of bars like they do in the first section, we have them changing every beat at times. So that faster rhythm of chord change gives that section a sort of swell of urgency. And it sounds great. So it's not always about which chords, it's about when they change. You can also hear this in Changes by David Bowie. There's some sections of Changes where we stay on chords for a bar, and then we get the time may change me, and that changes every beat. But I can't trace time. And so that really changes how we're experiencing the song at that point. In Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, the rate of chord change slows down in the chorus. And that perfectly matches the intention of stillness. You know, the chorus is hallelujah, hallelujah. And that little moment of that sort of slight feeling of reflective stillness that gives us, it perfectly matches the mood of the song and the contemplative sort of prayer-like quality as compared with in the verse when the chords are changing typically twice every bar. So just changing how long the chords last in different sections of your song can really change the feeling and the energy in the song, and that's definitely well worth trying out. So if I were to play a C, G, A minor, F progression, and then I went, it's really changed the level of energy. So this is definitely something that you can use and explore in your own writing very easily. Tip 5, we're finishing strong. Use the secondary dominant. What is a secondary dominant? It is a chord that is not in your key, but we're going to use that chord to lead us to a chord that is in your key, so that it will create a sense of forward motion typically. So let's imagine that we're gonna land on a chord in our key, and it could be any of the chords in the key. So for example, let's imagine we're in C and we want to go to D minor. Instead of going straight from C to D minor, we are going to play the dominant of D minor. So the one that's a fifth above first. So we'd go, we're going to go to A7 before D minor. So A7 isn't in the key of C. In the key of C we have an A minor, not an A7, but it's going to pull us towards D minor in a satisfying way. And indeed we do hear that in Yesterday. We hear F, E minor, A7 to D minor in the verse. That sounds very cool there. And it happens again in the bridge. So the formula for doing that is to pick the chord you want to go to, any chord that you want to land on, and then you are just going to play the chord, the dominant chord, the 5 chord, for that chord before you get to the chord. So if I want E minor, I'm going to play B7. If I want A, I'm going to play E7. If I want G, I'm going to play D7. So try it with any minor or major chord in your key. You can use this trick in intros, bridges, anytime you just want to switch things up a little bit or give a chord a little bit more drama so that when we get to it, our ears are really ready to hear it. So the secondary dominant is going to get our ear ready to hear what's going to happen next and ready to arrive at the next chord. So quick recap. We have had using the 2 chord as a major. We have had accenting the 6 minor chord, so shifting the accent and what a section feels like from revolving around major to feeling like it's more driven by the minor. We have looked at the minor 4 chord. We have looked at, so using the 4 chord as a minor instead of a major. We have looked at changing the harmonic rhythm, so that changing the rate at which chord changes at different parts in the song to match the energy that you want. And we've looked at secondary dominance. Well, now you've got all these great ways of writing some cool chord progressions. How are we going to turn them into real songs? I have a free guide here called 10 Creative Ways to Start Writing Songs Faster. And it's full of 10 lyric and song prompts and idea prompts to get you started. You can use all of them again and again, so there's really no limit to how many songs you could write using this. And it basically means that you do not need to use lack of inspiration as a barrier to growing your skills and abilities as a songwriter. And it's free, so the link's below. Thank you very much for watching. If you have found this useful, please do like, subscribe, comment. Tell me which of these techniques you're going to use first or what you wrote with it. And I'm Deanna de Cabarrus from Songwriting Lessons Online. Thank you.